It's been a few months since Mr. Resetti has had a spotlight on this channel, so I figured it's time to revisit him over and over and over. That is, today we're going to be discussing a variety of game crashes and softlocks present within the original Animal Crossing that can only be escaped through resetting the game. And of course, since the only way to escape these scenarios is to reset the game, expect several visits from Mr. Resetti if you try these yourself. So, with that said, let's get started. One of the earliest softlocks you can perform requires an additional player on your save file. After you finish the opening chores, a second player character can then join your game and get their own house in your town. These houses, by default, will always come with a diary in it where players can write personal entries for each day. The developers even thought of other players potentially coming into your house and taking a peek at your diary, so they gave you an option to lock each entry from being opened by other players. So, if you go ahead and lock any diary entry and then play as another player and attempt to open it, you'll be greeted with this message. This system typically works fine, and no matter how many times you spam trying to open it, the diary remains locked. Yet, if you happen to precisely time your A press to try and reopen the diary exactly when this warning message fades, you will be softlocked on this screen forever. Inputting any button does nothing, and you'll be forced to reset to escape this screen. This softlock occurs because the game is attempting to load the locked diary warning message at the same time it's fading out and being destroyed. In turn, it appears the game gets stuck since it thinks there is still a warning menu active and is waiting for it to fade out. But of course, since there isn't actually a menu active, it will end up just waiting forever. Interestingly, from my testing, this seems to only occur on these specific diary submenus. And it's fairly simple to do this for yourself. If nothing else, it's pretty humorous that such a softlock exists only when a player is trying to take a peek at another player's diary. Definitely purely coincidental, but it does feel like some divine punishment from Nintendo for trying to sneak a peek. I mentioned in a previous video that you can get out of bounds by using a snowball on the beach, which can allow you to walk on water and explore quite a far ways out. And it turns out this is not the only way to get out of bounds with a snowball, as you can actually do a similar thing at the far north of your town by abusing signboard collision. Set up a snowball like this in between signboards with a full inventory and then wiggle around while attempting to pick up a signboard. If successful, you'll be pushed by the snowball when you drop the sign again, and all the active collision will push you on top of the signboards. From here, you can simply walk north onto the train tracks and explore out of bounds, though there isn't much to see. Besides getting run over by a train. Similar to the ocean out of bounds glitch, attempting to open the map on invalid acres that are usually not present in your town will crash the game and force a reset. This occurs because the game only has proper code to render the characters for your town acres, and thus going beyond these acres causes the game to try and render characters outside of its valid range on the map HUD. The result is the game recognizing something is wrong and immediately crashing and resetting itself. If you bypass the crash handler with hacks or with the built-in debug mode, you can actually see the jarbled mess the game is attempting to render on your map. Another fun softlock you can do out of bounds is to perform the ocean snowball glitch, walk over to Cap'n, and then try to talk to him from in between the water and the beach. If you then choose to visit the island, the player is supposed to path towards the boat and hop in to begin the Cap'n cutscene. However, talking to him from this exact position screws up the game's pathing, and you end up stuck here walking in place forever attempting to get inside the boat. And you guessed it, the only way to escape this is to reset the game. And no, unfortunately Mr. Resetti does not care that you were stuck walking on water. One final thing you can do with this out of bounds glitch is actually exclusive to the Japanese E+ version of the game. See, in the North American version of Animal Crossing, the island's data is created alongside your town creation at the very start of the game. However, in Dobutsu no Mori E+, the island data is not actually created until you talk to Cap'n for the very first time. Thus, if you go out of bounds before ever talking to Cap'n and attempt to walk over to the island, the game crashes as it tries to load data that doesn't yet exist. If we again bypass this crash handler, you can see that this is the case as the island is completely empty and void of trees and houses. Cap'n himself isn't even here, so there is actually no way to get home as well. Either way, you're looking at yet another reset and another visit from Mr. Resetti. One of the most fascinating glitches I've talked about on this channel is the ability to wrong warp to a beta testing map. I won't repeat on this too much here since I already have an entire video covering this, but I'll touch on the various game crashes that can occur due to this glitch. Essentially, by paying off your debt at the post office in Acres A1 or A2 at the exact same time the game is loading a sports fair event, you can wrong warp to various places in the game. One of these places is your last saved location in front of your house, where the game is set in a strange state where the sports fair is only partially active. If you then head to the Wishing Well Acre, you will see all the villagers in a static position and you can't even move or talk to them. And leaving this acre will cause the game to realize something is terribly wrong and immediately crash. If you instead use this glitch to wrong warp to the beta testing map, you can also crash the game by abusing the same map opening glitch we talked about earlier. Since you're technically not even in your own town, opening the map on certain acres will cause the same out-of-bounds rendering glitch to occur and will crash the game. And finally, if you attempt this same glitch with the post office in Acres A4 or A5, the game will crash immediately upon exiting the post office. This is because the game is attempting to warp you to the beta map, but Acres A4 and A5 do not actually exist on that map, resulting in an invalid read and a game crash. Last video, I also mentioned that custom password codes that you can tell to Tom Nook can also cause game crashes and softlocks. To explain this a bit further, this is because these password codes contain text that activate common control codes when read by Tom Nook. I was a little vague in my last video, but these crashes are not due to the actual characters in the code, but are instead caused by Tom Nook actually repeating the characters embedded in the code. This is why the crash always occurs when Tom Nook physically reads the characters on screen, since it is the act of printing these characters on the screen that activates the common control codes and crashes the game. And yes, it is rather humorous that Tom Nook mentions your unfortunate circumstance right before crashing. Lastly, let's talk about some softlocks and crashes that cannot normally be found in standard gameplay, but are nevertheless present in the game if you have the means to access them. I've talked before about paper airplane corruption and how these unused items duplicate every time you reload the map, to the point where they overtake your town and crash the game when you try to render them. This item is thankfully unused, but if you happen to spawn one in your town, you can in fact pick it up and throw it. But if you're familiar with my paper airplane video, you'll know that throwing the paper airplane will attempt to load a throwing animation that doesn't actually exist, and thus the game gets stuck and softlocked forever. Another unused item very similar to this airplane is this moving golden cube, which was likely used for testing collision. Using a hack to spawn this in your town reveals that it behaves very similarly to the paper airplane, where reloading your map will cause it to duplicate itself to adjacent plots. And of course, just like the paper airplanes, you can do this over and over to cause a similar game crash when attempting to render all of these cubes. This happens to both sets of items because they're both assigned an item ID starting with 8. These IDs are usually assigned to actors, which have code to check if the plot to spawn them in is empty, and in the case that the origin plot is occupied, searches in a 3x3 area around it to spawn the actor instead. Since the airplane and cube actors are unfinished, it appears as if this code ends up being called twice, and thus, these actors exponentially duplicate over and over. Finally, let's talk about a last unused item with ID 1FBC. This ID corresponds to an NES item with the name Legend of Zelda, but this is a different item entirely than the standard Legend of Zelda NES item. Unlike that item, which actually functions and allows you to play the full Legend of Zelda, this item immediately crashes the game when you interact with it. The reason for this is actually pretty interesting and relates back to the original Japanese GameCube version. In Dobutsu no Mori Plus, the version of Animal Crossing that the North American game is based on, there are actually two separate Legend of Zelda items that are obtainable in-game. One of them plays the original Famicom Disk System version of Zelda, and the other one plays the cartridge-based Famicom version. Both of these versions of Zelda are included in the Japanese disc, and thus, both items here are fully playable. However, when bringing the game to North America, the localizers translated and ported both items as Legend of Zelda, but actually removed the Famicom Disk System ROM from the game files. See, the NES items work by basically pointing to a specific numbered ROM on the game disc to boot up. Thus, interacting with this Legend of Zelda item actually calls a function looking for a specific 20th ROM to boot up. But since it was removed from the game, there is nothing to boot up and the game crashes. However, as you might have guessed, the code here is still sound. So, if you actually inject an extra NES ROM into the game files to bring the total number of ROMs to 20, then the game can now actually find a 20th ROM to boot up and will load the game you injected normally. This doesn't even have to be Zelda, but can be any NES or Famicom Disk System ROM entirely, which is pretty neat. Of course, this still requires external modification to even receive this item, but it does crash the game, and I figured it would be a fun bit of trivia to talk about here. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing about some of the various crashes and softlocks this game has to offer, even if I'm sure Mr. Resetti isn't too fond of our shenanigans. I'm continuing development on some big plans for this channel, so if you'd like to stay up to date with future uploads, you can follow me on Twitter or through my YouTube channel posts. As always, thank you to Lunascape, Inferno Wrath, Lorenzo, Cass, Cynthia, Tyrant Link, Kawa Run, Mentis98, Silly Marina, Villager, Hornet, Tarumi, Vinny Diddy, Pidge01, Kai D, and the rest of my Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And finally, thank you all for watching. Until next time.